Most people think the top 1% invest better because they pick better stocks. That's wrong. The real difference is not what they buy, it's the order they invest in things. And this is where almost every retail investor gets it backwards. They start with stocks, or ETFs, or whatever is trending on YouTube this month. But the wealthy don't start there. They treat financial assets as the last step, not the first. And once you understand that order, high-income ETFs suddenly make a lot more sense instead of looking like traps or magic money machines. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't have excess cash flow, investing feels stressful. Every dip feels personal. Every red day feels like a mistake. That's not an investing problem. That's a structure problem. So, the 1% actually invest in is stability. Not the exciting kind of stability, but honestly, boring stability. They make sure their base is solid before they ever even think about returns. And that means, health, skills, and income reliability. Because without those three, every portfolio decision just becomes emotional. And emotional investors, well, they always underperform. Now, here's where this connects directly to income ETFs. Most people try to use ETFs to solve problems they were never really designed to fix. They want growth, income, safety, and peace of mind from a single ticker. But honestly, that doesn't exist. The wealthy don't ask one asset to do everything. They assign roles. Think about it this way. Your income is the engine. Your investments are the storage system. If the engine is weak, you keep pulling money out of storage just to survive. That's when compounding breaks. This is why high-income ETFs are misunderstood. They're not growth engines. They're cash flow tools, and when they're used after income stability is established, they behave very differently. Let's talk numbers for a second. If someone earns $40,000 per year and invests 10%, that's $4,000 annually. Even with a great market return, that won't change their life fast. But if that same person builds skills and income first and increases earnings to $100,000, now investing 10% is $10,000 per year. Same discipline. Completely different outcome. The top 1% obsess over this gap. Now, once that base is built, this is where financial assets come in. And this is where high-income ETFs finally make sense. So, instead of asking, how fast can this grow? The question really becomes, what job does this dollars need to do? Some capital is for growth, some is for protection, and some is for income. This is actually why wealthy investors often allocate a portion of their portfolio to income strategies, even when they don't need the cash yet. They're not spending the income. They're training the portfolio to generate cash. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a $100,000 portfolio, not theoretical, real money. If that entire amount is in growth assets, income is $0 unless you sell. But if 20% of that portfolio is allocated to income ETFs yielding around 10%, that $20,000 can generate roughly $2,000 per year in cash flow. That cash can be reinvested, redirected, or simply held as dry powder. The key is optionality. The wealthy love optionality. Now here's the mistake most investors make. They see a high yield and immediately assume it replaces growth. That's false. High-income ETFs replace selling, not growth. So let's take an ETF like JEPI. Its yield has historically hovered somewhere around 7 to 9%. Depending on, market conditions. It doesn't aim to beat the S&P 500 in bull markets. Its role is really about smoother returns and providing monthly cash flow with lower volatility. Or, take QYLD, which has paid monthly income in the 10 to 12% range historically, but it caps the upside by selling at the money calls. It's not broken. It's actually doing exactly what it's designed to do. The problem isn't the ETF itself. The real issue is expecting it to behave like something else. The top 1% don't argue with structure. They respect it. And here's the part that, really changes how you think about investing. Once your income is strong and your portfolio starts generating its own cash, risk just feels different. Volatility feels smaller. You stop chasing the next hot thing because your system already works. Once the foundation is solid, this is where the strategy actually starts to separate experienced investors from everyone else. You know, the wealthy don't really ask, which ETF is best. Instead, they're more likely to ask, what role does this money need to play right now? And that's exactly where high-income ETFs come in. Not as heroes, not as villains, but honestly, just as tools. So, let's talk about 4 income ETFs that come up constantly and, well, why most people end up misusing them. Okay, so let's start with JEPI. This ETF combines large-cap US stocks with an options strategy that's, designed to generate monthly income. Historically, its yield has floated around 7 to 9%, which is pretty solid for this kind of fund. Its expense ratio is 0.35%. Now, JEPI's job isn't explosive growth. Its job is smoother returns, reduced volatility, and dependable monthly cash flow. When used correctly, JEPI is a stabilizer, but if you use it the wrong way, people start to complain that it lags the market. Honestly, that's kind of like complaining a seatbelt doesn't make your car faster. Then there's QYLD. This one is, honestly, even more misunderstood. QYLD owns the NASDAQ 100 and sells at-the-money covered calls every single month. That's why its yield has often landed in the 10 to 12% range. The trade-off here is capped upside. In strong bull markets, QYLD will underperform growth funds. But that's not a flaw. That's just the cost of front-loaded income. If you buy QYLD expecting capital appreciation, you'll be disappointed. But if you buy it expecting predictable monthly income without selling shares, it does exactly what it says on the box. Next is QQQI, which takes a different approach. Instead of selling calls directly on the NASDAQ 100 like QYLD, it uses a more flexible option strategy. Historically, its yield has been higher than JEPI and lower than QYLD, often landing in the 10–15% range depending on market conditions. The expense ratio sits around 0.68%. The key difference is upside participation. QQQI allows more room for growth than QYLD, while still generating substantial monthly income. That makes it more volatile, but also more flexible for investors who want income and some growth exposure. Then there's DIVO. This one flies under the radar. DIVO focuses on dividend-paying blue-chip stocks and enhances income with selective covered calls. Its yield has generally hovered in the 4 to 6% range. Expense ratio is around 0.55%. DIVO is not a yield monster. It's a consistency play. Lower yield, steadier growth, and better long-term capital preservation. It's the kind of ETF the wealthy use to smooth out portfolios, not to impress anyone on social media. Now, let's talk about how this actually works together, because this is where most people get it wrong. Imagine a $100,000 portfolio. So instead of dumping everything into just one ETF, the portfolio is, layered. For example, 40,000 goes into growth-oriented assets. This could be broad market ETFs or dividend growers. That money, honestly, is not expected to produce income today. Then, 30,000 goes into moderate income and stability. JEPI and DIVO fit well here. At an average yield of around 6%, that portion can generate roughly $2,000 per year in income. The remaining 30,000 is allocated to higher income strategies like QYLD and QQQI. At a blended yield of around 11%, that slice can generate over $3,000 annually. Now, just pause for a moment and look at what just happened. The portfolio actually produces over $5,000 per year in cash flow, and that's without selling a single share. That income can be reinvested, used to rebalance during market dips, or, honestly, just left as a buffer. And here's the important part. None of this money is expected to do everything. Each portion really has a job. Growth compounds, income pays, stability absorbs shocks. That's how wealthy portfolios breathe. The biggest mistake retail investors make is forcing one ETF to be all three at once. When it fails, they call it a scam. But in reality, it was just misused. Now let's turn all of this into something real, because frameworks are useless if you can't apply them without second-guessing yourself. Picture a $100,000 portfolio again, not as a fantasy number, but as a checkpoint. Whether you're there already or working toward it, the logic stays the same. The first thing the top 1% do at this stage is stop asking how much something yields, and start asking how it behaves under stress. That's why they don't chase the highest number on the screen. They design for survivability first. So let's walk through a clean, practical allocation that reflects that mindset. Start with $40,000 dedicated to growth and long-term compounding. This portion is not touched for income. No withdrawals, no monthly expectations. Its only job is to grow over time. This is what protects purchasing power over decades. If this part grows at 7% to 10% annually, it quietly does the heavy lifting in the background. Next comes the income stabilizer layer. $30,000 allocated to ETFs, like JEPI and DIVO. These funds are not meant to excite you. They're meant to pay you and reduce volatility. At a blended yield of roughly 6%, that $30,000 generates about $1,800 per year. That's $150 per month. Not life-changing money, but incredibly powerful psychologically. Because once income starts flowing, investors stop panicking during drawdowns. They stop checking prices every hour. Cash flow calms behavior. Then comes the tactical income layer. Another $30,000 split between higher yield ETFs like QYLD and QQQI. This is where most people get uncomfortable, and that's exactly why it works when sized correctly. At an average yield around 11%, this portion can generate roughly $3,300 per year. That's nearly $275 per month. Add it all together, and the portfolio produces just over $5,000 per year in cash flow. Without selling, without timing the market, without guessing. Now here's the part that almost nobody talks about. The wealthy don't spend this income right away. In many cases, they reinvest it strategically. During strong markets, income is reinvested into growth assets. During weak markets, it's used to rebalance or add to positions at lower prices. That's how income becomes a volatility advantage instead of a drag. This is also why high-income ETFs are dangerous when used incorrectly. If someone builds a portfolio that's 80% high yield and relies on it for living expenses too early, they remove flexibility. Every market dip becomes stressful because the income suddenly feels fragile. But when income ETFs are layered instead of stacked, the system breathes. Let's talk about expectations, because this is where disappointment usually begins. JEPI is not going to double your money. QYLD is not going to outperform the Nasdaq in bull markets. DIVO will never be flashy. QQQI will have volatile periods. None of that is failure. That is design. The wealthy understand this because they separate ego from function. They don't need every investment to be a winner. They need the portfolio to work as a whole. Another mistake retail investors make is ignoring taxes. Many income ETFs distribute income that may be taxed as ordinary income depending on account type. That doesn't make them bad. It means placement matters. Holding certain income ETFs inside tax-advantaged accounts can dramatically improve outcomes over time. This is why copying someone else's portfolio without understanding context almost always ends badly. Now zoom out for a moment. The real lesson here isn't about JEPI, QYLD, QQQI, or DIVO specifically. It's about thinking in systems instead of tickers. The top 1% don't wake up asking what to buy today. They wake up asking whether their system still makes sense. When it does, they do very little. When it doesn't, they adjust quietly. If you're early in your journey, focus on increasing income and learning how these tools behave. If you're mid-career, layering income ETFs can reduce stress and improve discipline. If you're approaching financial independence, income becomes a control mechanism instead of a necessity. That's the shift most investors never make. High-income ETFs are not shortcuts. They're not scams. They're not magic. They are instruments. Used correctly, they add stability, optionality, and confidence. Used incorrectly, they create frustration and blame. If there's one takeaway from this entire breakdown, it's this. Stop asking whether an ETF is good or bad. Start asking what role it plays and whether that role fits where you are right now. That's how the top 1% think about investing. Quietly, systematically, and without drama. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing to MoneyQuest Broker. This channel isn't about hype or promises. It's about understanding how income strategies actually work so you can make better decisions with your own money. And just to be clear, this content is for educational purposes only. It's not financial advice. Every investor's situation is different, and income strategies carry risks that need to be understood before investing.